All right, today we're going to be taking notes about atoms and molecules. So I'm going to title my page. And I like to underline my titles just because I think it helps to make them clear. So we're going to be talking about atoms and molecules from the context of food. So first of all, let's just make sure that we're all aware food is made of cells. And those could be plant cells. They could be animal cells. If I could spell, they could be animal cells. They could be fungus, like a mushroom. So they're all different types of organisms. All those organisms are made up of cells, and food is made up of those cells. So, as we go through here, we need to know that cells are made of molecules. After all, our notes are about atoms and molecules. Now, there are two different types of molecules. They're like classes of molecules that we talk about when we're talking about food and when we're talking about cells. And the larger of them are called polymers. And examples of polymers are things like carbohydrates, lipids or fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. So these are polymers, and that's a vocabulary word that we're going to learn. Now, polymers can be broken down into monomers. And I like to think of these like Legos, where the ship that you build is, or the house that you build is the polymer, but monomers are the individual components that you use to build that ship. So mono means one, poly means many. So one unit of a carbohydrate is a sugar. So carbohydrates are made from sugars. They can be broken down into sugars. Lipids and fats, those are made of glycerol and fatty acids. So fats are made out of glycerol and fatty acid pieces that are then stuck together. And then my proteins, those are going to be made out of amino acids. And last but not least, my nucleic acids are going to be made out of nucleotides. So by the time we are done learning about all of these things, you will have these memorized. But for right now, these are vocabulary words that you don't really have to worry about memorizing. We are going to spend so much time going over them that you're going to end up memorizing them. But don't worry about like making flashcards or anything like that. Now, all of these things that we've listed, sugars, glycerol, amino acids, nucleic acids, proteins, all of these things are molecules. They're just the specific molecules the cells are made of. So let's define what is a molecule. Well, a molecule is when you have, I'm going to scoot this up a little bit. A molecule is when you have two or more atoms bonded together. So they're bonded to each other. And these can be the same type of atom or they can be different type of atoms. So what is an atom? An atom is the smallest single unit of an element. So when you think of the periodic table of elements, those are atoms. So like you have carbon atoms or hydrogen atoms. So let's look at a molecule of a type of sugar. So this is going to be a glucose molecule. And glucose is a type of sugar. And it's kind of a complicated molecule. So I'm going to start with an oxygen bonded to a carbon, to a carbon, to another carbon, to another carbon, to another carbon, back to the oxygen. And then this is bonded to a carbon bonded to two hydrogens and what we call an OH. And then each of these carbons here are going to be bonded to an OH. So an oxygen and a hydrogen and a hydrogen. And this is just one way to represent this, but this is a glucose molecule, and there's another hydrogen sitting there. So a glucose molecule is made up of a bunch of atoms. For example, this hydrogen is an atom, this hydrogen is an atom. Now, another way to write glucose is C6H12O6. And what that means is that there are a total of 6 carbons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 12 hydrogens, and there are 6 oxygens. And that refers to the atoms that are in this glucose molecule. So as you can see, if I were to put together multiple glucose molecules in order to make, say, a carbohydrate, that carbohydrate is going to be made of a whole bunch of different atoms. All right, let's talk about some facts about atoms and facts about matter. So facts about matter. There are going to be 3 important facts about matter. 1, matter cannot be created or destroyed. So matter is made up of atoms. So atoms last forever. And another way to say this is they cannot be created or destroyed. And that's going to be really important. Another thing that we know is that atoms have mass. What this means is that changes in mass equal changes in matter. Or in other words, atoms, because remember, atoms and matter are the same thing. Now, this becomes really important because we can actually measure the mass of an object, and if the mass increases, then we know that it's made of more atoms. And if the mass decreases, then we know that it is made of fewer atoms. So that is pretty important. And then last but not least, atoms can be bonded to other atoms, forming molecules. All right, those are my facts about matter. Now we're going to record some facts about energy. All right, rule number 1, or fact number 1 about energy. Like matter, energy lasts forever. So just like matter, it cannot be created or destroyed. Rule number 2, energy can be transformed. So what this means is it can change types. So for example, if I turn on a light bulb, the energy that is in my wires, the electrical energy, is converted into light energy. It's also converted into heat energy, which is why light bulbs heat up. So the energy is transformed. It's not being created or destroyed. It lasts forever, but it can change types. Rule number 3, in molecules, energy can be stored in the bonds between atoms. So energy can be stored in the bonds between atoms. And that is chemical energy. All right, so the last rule here, I'm gonna barely be able to fit it onto my page, is that changing bonds transforms energy. So changing, and when I say changing, I mean like making and breaking. So changing bonds transforms energy. All right, so when I look at my molecule of glucose, the bonds between these atoms are going to have chemical energy. And some bonds, depending on the type of bond that it is, some bonds are going to have more energy than other bonds. So the type of bonds that have the most chemical energy that we can then release when we break and reform those bonds are the bonds between carbon and carbon and carbon and hydrogen. So I'm going to put a little note here that carbon to carbon bonds and carbon to hydrogen bonds are what we're going to call high energy. Breaking and reforming those bonds is going to allow us to transform a lot of energy. So here are our notes. I'm going to make just a couple of edits to this to make it more understandable. I'm going to put a box around my keyword here, molecule, and a box around my keyword atom, because those are definitions that you are going to need to know. I'm also going to then underline that these are facts about matter. That's going to be important. So I'm just adding some points here, and facts about energy. So these are rules that we're going to be using a lot, and you're going to want to have those memorized as well. We're going to be applying them to different situations to see how they work. So at this point, you should be able to identify the difference between a molecule and an atom. You should know that the bonds are where the energy is stored, and you should know these rules: atoms lasting forever, energy lasting forever, atoms having mass, energy being able to be transformed, and then the rules about bonding atoms together to make molecules, and changing those bonds transforms energy.